What's up, everyone? This is Fritz again, here with another episode of Sneakerhead Ambition. Today I'm going to be covering a topic that is very relevant to the botting space, and that is proxies. I'm going to go over why you need them, how to use them, the different types there are, and just some general information that you should probably be aware of when choosing which ones to purchase. Just wanted to go over this starting off. There is a lot of deceiving marketing going on within the proxy community by the companies. Now, what I mean by that is this. There's a lot of just repackaging things and putting a different name on it. Meaning there's a lot of resi providers that you're going to see in here today that sell the same thing, but just put their brand name on it. And the same thing is going on with a lot of DCs and ISPs. So just as we're moving forward through this, just know that you've got to do your research on the proxies you are buying and making sure that you're not buying 3 separate proxies, say, when they're really all the same thing, just with a different brand name on them. So I'll go into that more detail, but just please keep that in mind that you really have to make sure that you know what you're buying so that you're not just being redundant and buying the same thing over and over again. If you already know what a proxy is and kind of know the gist of it, just bear with me for a second. But if you are brand new, a proxy is basically like an IP address that you will get from a company that you can plug into your bot. So you'd go into the bot, you'd put in the proxy, and that would mask the traffic. So if you opened up, let's say 10 windows on a bot, you would put a proxy in for each one, and it would let you mask the traffic from all 10 of those tasks so that the site wouldn't see that it's the same person. Most of these are going to be in the US. I'm really just kind of addressing US botters, so that's all you're really going to need. But they do have proxies for other countries as well. It just depends on where you're botting from. And like I said, within the bot, you can put in hundreds, thousands of proxies. That's typically what you're going to need if you're running 100, 500, 1,000 tasks. So again, each bot is going to be pretty much the same thing. It's going to have a tab that says proxies under it, and you're going to go in there and you're just going to input lists that you would generate from the company that you purchased the proxies from. So if I purchased proxies from company A, I would get those proxies in either residential or ISP, which I'll discuss in a second, and then I would put them into my bot, list there, and that would help me mask that traffic, and therefore I can make it look like I'm coming from different states, the East Coast, West Coast, just depends, like I said, on the site you're botting and where their servers are. First, I'm going to go over residential proxies out of the 3 different types, as I feel that they are the easiest to use and the best for beginners. When you go to buy these proxies, you are going to be buying an unlimited amount of proxies essentially, but you're going to be buying them by the gigabyte. So you can buy 1 gigabyte, 2, 10, you can buy a lot of data, but if you are just starting out, just get 2 gigabytes of data and you can generate as many proxies as you want for a list. Now, something to keep in mind, and a key distinction between residential and ISPs, again, that you can run out of data. So if you are only running 10 tasks, you're not going to use much data. If you are running 1,000, you can burn through 10 gigabytes of data in a couple minutes if you're on foot sites. So please just keep that in mind as we're going through this. Right? When you get residential proxies, you are paying for data. When buying residential proxies, this is really where you need to do some research and make sure that you know what you're buying. If you're buying residential proxies and you buy from 3 different companies without doing your research, it is very possible that you purchased the exact same thing from just 3 different companies. If you are purchasing residential proxies from a company that just has proxies for sale and is not private, 95% of those proxies are going to fall under 4 separate providers. It's either going to be OxyLab, GeoSurf, Hellnut, or Smart. If you've never heard of those proxy companies, those are the proxies that, like, let's say Leaf, Hollow, Oculus, you name the proxy company, for the most part, they're purchasing from one of these 4 companies and then putting their own title or branding on top of the residential proxies. So I just say this because I continue to see people who have residential proxies from 3 separate providers, but the providers use the exact same data or the exact same proxy pools. So you need to make sure through research, you can find this out. That's a whole nother video on its own that I'm going to do at another point. Or you can just ask people that have them. Maybe the Discord can tell you, but you really need to make sure, like I said, that you're not purchasing the exact same thing while trying to diversify. But if you're diversifying like that, you don't know what you're buying, and just make sure that you're not buying the same thing over and over again. As far as what sites residential proxies work on, they're going to work on pretty much every site, especially if you have 1, 2, 3 good providers that cover, let's say, GeoSurf, Oxy, and Smart. You're going to be able to get through on any site with those. They are going to be outperformed by ISPs and hybrids in certain situations, but those are going to be more upfront costs, which we'll go over in a second. But residential proxies are going to be a great option for those starting out. You can buy a gigabyte or two and just get your feet wet without having to jump in and purchase 25 or 50 proxies for the month, which can be a little more expensive and a little more uncertainty as far as what drops you'll get to run them on. As far as price goes, you're really not going to need many gigabytes if you're running, Shopify with 5 to 10 tasks, or even if you're running foot sites and Yeezy Supply and have 50 to 100 tasks, you're not going to need much more than 2-3 gigabytes. So that's nice. You don't have to put up this huge upfront cost, and you can kind of gauge how you're doing by checking your data in drop. So that's just something to remember. I see these priced anywhere from $5 a gigabyte all the way up to 25. So you can either try to work in on a budget and get a lot of data, or you can try to go for quality over quantity. So the only downfall to resis is their speed and their stability. They are going to be slower, and you are going to run through a lot more of them than if you had ISPs or hybrids. So that's what we'll get into next. Next, we're going to cover ISPs, which are both faster and more stable than residential proxies. An ISP is basically a data center proxy, but the ISP part stands for Internet Service Provider, meaning that it's going to be masked as a Comcast ISP, a Verizon ISP, CenturyLink, Sprint. Any of those is going to keep the site from seeing that it's a data center proxy, but this is also going to give it speeds and stability that are far greater than the residential proxies that we talked about first. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest differences between residential proxies and ISP proxies is the data. Residential proxies, again, you are paying for data and can generate the unlimited IPs that we talked about earlier. With ISPs, you are paying for the proxies. So you are paying for, let's say, 25 proxies. With that, you have unlimited data. So you can run them 24/7 until they get banned, but you only have those 25. You can't generate 26, not 27. You get your 25 that you paid for, and that's what you've got for the month. Now, with that being said about the data, the biggest problem is that sometimes if let's say you get 25 ISP proxies, you could start off on a foot site drop, and within the first 30 seconds, all the IPs could be banned. So if that were to happen with a residential proxy provider, if your IPs get banned, you can try to generate more proxies, right? You can try to continue to kind of mess with the bot protection and try to switch that up. If you have 25 ISPs and they get banned within 30 seconds, which has happened to me plenty of times, you're done for that drop as far as those ISPs go. So you've got to remember that all the diversification talk is extremely important. Are there drops where you'll run ISPs and they won't hit? Yes. Are there drops where you run resis and they won't hit? Yes, but you can't really tell what's going to happen when you're going into a drop. So it is just, again, important to cover all your bases and just be aware that, each drop is different and different types of proxies will hit. One way that companies have started to try to combat the banning is also to offer 24/7 proxies and on-off proxies. So just so you know the difference, if you are buying 24/7 proxies, those are proxies that you can use 24/7. They are going to get banned more easily because people are going to likely abuse them. The on-off proxies, companies have started to turn them off for the majority of the day other than when there are drops. You'll be able to run them during that time, but then the company will turn them off. So this is just another way that companies are trying to combat the proxies getting banned, and just something you need to keep in mind when you're purchasing. As far as pricing goes for ISPs, I did mention that they definitely are going to be more expensive than resis. As far as 25 ISPs usually go for about 50 to 60 bucks a month. So that's going to be about the price range for 25, and you can scale that up. And you're going to be able to buy them in blocks of either 25, 50, 100, 200, or 256. So you're going to be able to start off small if you want. You are also going to be able to buy bigger blocks. And if you really kind of get into this and have a bigger setup, you can also buy entire subnets, which some companies will offer, which means that you're the only user that's using that entire subnet, which can be beneficial, obviously, but you can also get the entire thing banned. So that's something to keep in mind. Finally, we're going to go over hybrid proxies. I mentioned those earlier. These wouldn't have even made the list at the beginning of the year as they didn't really exist. But these are basically a hybrid between a residential and an ISP, and I'll get into those specific differences now. So typically within the proxy space, there's always something new. There's some new type of proxy, there's some new thing, and this really is it right now. If you have heard of live proxies or seen any of their success this year, it's been absolutely ridiculous. But they're the company that kind of pioneered this. There are two other companies, Scarlet and Unknown, also have a hybrid product that they offer. I've used all three and I've hit with all three, so they've definitely been a welcome addition to the proxy setup that I have. As far as data usage and IPs, like I said, these are kind of a mix. So with these, you are paying for, like, let's say in live, you pay for 300 IPs. Now, you get 300 IPs and that's all you get, but at the same time, they also they're metered. So you've got the 300 IPs, but let's say you've got 10 gigabytes of data. So they are being metered, so you can't just run them indefinitely, but they're gonna be a lot more stable than residential proxies, and these really have been the best bet this year on foot sites and Yeezy Supply. Now, this is all well and good, but the issue here with the hybrid providers would be that none of them are just accepting new members and aren't just for sale, they're always sold out. So if you wanted to get into either Live, Unknown, or Scarlet, those three companies have this hybrid product. You're gonna have to follow them on Twitter, turn on your notifications, and you're gonna have to be watching for when they drop invites and just stay on top of that and try to get in the best you can that way. The next thing we're gonna cover and the next thing to keep in mind is gonna be the types of proxies you'll use on specific sites. So the site and the drop is gonna have a big impact on just your overall setup, the type of proxies you're using, and the amount of data that you're gonna need. So like I just mentioned, the type of drop it is and your just overall bot setup is gonna have a huge impact on, again, the types of proxies you have and the amount of data that you're gonna need. As far as setups go, for me personally, I try to have at least 2 to 3 Resi providers on a drop. So I'm at least trying to cover GeoSurf, Oxy, and Smart. I also use Hex, which is a private Resi pool, but I try to cover at least 2 to 4 Resi providers. And again, I'll usually have about 5 gigabytes each for those going into drops. And I'm typically running 1 to 2,000 tasks on foot sites and Yeezy Supply. And then I try to go in with 2 to 3 ISP providers as well. If it's a big drop, I might try to get some daily ISPs to try to pump up the volume more in my ISPs. But other than that, I just spread those evenly throughout my bots and try to cover all my bases. And just hammering this point home, just always keep in mind that you should diversify between ISPs and Resis. There are, without question, going to be drops where if you ran 100% ISPs, you'd do better. And there are going to be drops that if you did 100% on Resis, you'd also do better. But you've got to keep in mind that you can't predict that. So it really is just a good idea to have quality Resis, quality ISPs, a hybrid provider, and just try to spread those evenly on each drop. And that's going to be your best bet overall. Next, I'm going to go over some common mistakes that are made with proxies. God knows that I've made pretty much every single one of these in my time in this space. So I'm just going to cover these to hopefully guide you away from these. The first common mistake is to make sure your proxies are either IP authorized or not. If they are, you need to go onto the proxy dashboard and input your IP address or any of your server's IP addresses that you are going to use that proxy for. This is a huge deal. The first time I ever ran for a drop, I did not do this, and the proxies will not work at all. So you need to make sure, just check on the dashboard, see if they're IP off. If they are, you need to add your IP address. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make, and it's one of the easiest to avoid if you know what you're doing. I can't tell you how many people in the cook groups I'm in and the proxy servers I'm in come in and they're like, my proxies don't work, my proxies don't work. You probably didn't authorize your IP. Another thing to avoid, and that could be a problem if you don't know what you're looking at, is to not use rotating proxies. When you get into a residential proxy dashboard, you're going to have the option for static or rotating. Pick static and never look at it again. I have not used rotating proxies once in 2 years. Avoid them, use static, that's all you need. The third common mistake is proxy and bot related, but is having your delays set too low. So you need to make sure you go to your cook group, you need to see what sites you're running for, and you need to set your bot's delays at an appropriate amount. If you don't do this and they're too low, you can get all of them banned, you could get your ISPs banned, so you need to make sure that you do this and are aware of this, because that's going to play a big factor in whether you get banned or not on drops. And fourth would just be running them all day. So running your proxies for restocks all day with low delays, things like that. That's kind of abusing your IPs, and that's going to get them banned rather quickly. So just make sure too that you don't leave your bots running or running on too low of delays if you're running for restocks. And the final and fifth mistake that I will go over is having the same residential providers. I know that I've harped on this 3 or 4 times already, but you really need to make sure that when you're buying proxies from a residential provider, that you're not just buying the same exact proxies repackaged. So please just do your research and make sure that you're actually getting a company that covers GeoSurf, Oxy, Smart, Hellnut, and that should get you good to go. Finally, I'm just going to cover the reputable proxy providers in this space. If I mention them below, I've used them with success before, and I've seen a lot of success from people in my cook groups. So here are some of the best proxy providing companies in the space. I'll put a list below so you can look at it in more depth. I'm going to rattle some of them off, and I do not have any sponsorships yet. But these are the companies that I've used with success. And like I said, I'm not being paid for this, so this really is just my opinion and what's worked well for me. But any of these companies have worked well. Leaf, Oculus, Unknown, Lemon, Space, Trek, Black Hat, Ping, Live, Giroux, Hollow, and Scarlet. So like I said, I've used all of those successfully. I know people in the cook groups I'm in have also used those all successfully. And also, as far as the hybrid proxies go, like I said, Live, Scarlet, and Unknown all have those offerings. Obviously, just because I didn't list a company does not mean that they're trash, but this is what I've used and this is what I've used successfully. Like I said, there are other good companies out there, but you've also got to be aware that there is a lot of deceiving marketing going on. And for the 20th time in this video, please make sure if you're buying residential proxies that you're not buying the same thing over and over again. So just closing up this episode, just please make sure, like I said, when you're getting into botting or if you're already botting, that you're really thinking and planning out your setup. All sites, you shouldn't have the same setup for and will require different amounts of proxies, different data. So again, if you're just getting into it, get a gigabyte or two, get 25 ISPs. And if you're farther along, just try to continue to diversify. And like I said, make sure that you really are diversified and that you're trying to get all of those offerings. A couple types of resis, a couple type of ISPs, and a hybrid. And like I said, that should cover all your bases. Anyways, that's all I've got for you guys today on Sneakerhead Ambition. Hopefully you found the information I provided today helpful, useful. If you've got any other further questions or comments, just feel free to drop them in the chat below. I'll definitely be checking there. And other than that, like I said, hopefully you enjoyed the episode and just check back later this week and I'll have another one up. See you next time.